This is the Nate Shelman Show podcast from News Talk, KBOI Boise.
Congressman Russ Fulcher, how are you, sir?
Hey, Nate, I'm well. Thank you. Sorry for the delay here. We're in the middle of a vote series here on House floor.
Gee, Congressman, if only you were just waiting to come on this program instead of, voting and stuff, that would be fine, but unfortunately,
I hear you.
You weren't sent there to just wait for us to call.
It's always good to talk to folks at home, though, so thank you.
All right, so, gosh, huge news day. You're working on stuff. We're talking about stuff here. Let's talk about your thing first, because I got to get my blood pressure under control. I have to ask though, when you heard that the White House was in favor of breaching dams or thought it was a good idea, what was your initial response?
Well, it's par for the course. I'm struggle to find things that I agree with the White House administration on, and this would be no different. You probably have been talking about this, but you pull those dams out. they were put there for a reason. You're going to gut the economy of the Pacific Northwest. And I heard a previous statement you made that I agree with. There's this thing called power that kind of comes in handy every now and then when you throw the light switch on. You want to have that light come on, and this is cheap green energy on a hydro. And my gosh, if you don't have fossil fuels, you don't have hydro, and you can't mine because you need the copper and critical minerals to build a windmill or a solar system, then what do? And nuclear is not real popular with a lot of people. So, hey, hydro looks pretty good to me.
How definitive is this idea? How gung ho are they, or is it just kind of light? Is it just passive?
To be perfectly blunt, I don't think that it happens. I think we've got enough precautions and stopgaps that actually happens, and nor should it. The science simply does not support the move to breach that. In fact, there's some that says, hey, the silt that gets stirred up after decades of buildup at the bottom of these things could, kill whatever is left. But I don't think it's likely it's going to happen in the near term. Here's the problem, though. Every time this debate comes around, it kind of greases the skid for more traction over the course of time, and it's just problematic for our farmers, for the recreationalists, for the power that we just talked about, flood control. The list goes on. It will change the entire Pacific Northwest if we ever do that.
Why do I think it's not all about the salmon?
Because it's not. You've got this movement that somehow, some way, we think that there's this magical solution to have energy with no carbon emission whatsoever. And what we don't, I think we've become a victim of our own success to some extent, Nate, because we have cheap power right now, and people take it for granted. And we have irrigation capability, and people take it for granted. Well, there's a reason it's all there. Our predecessors didn't have all that. It got put in place with infrastructure, and so just ripping it out is not. It's going to have big ramifications. Then you got the Lewiston Port. That goes away. The city of Lewiston and Clarkson basically go away. If you take away that fundamental port, that's a huge part of their entire economic engine.
Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us from Washington D.C. and Congressman, are you free until 4:45, or is that, or are you busy? Do you have more votes you got to get to?
Well, what I can do is there will be another vote that comes down. I know what it is, and I know where I'm at. I can do that vote and then come back on if you got just a little flexibility.
I do, but in having you on, because I want to talk about the act that you co-sponsored, the Return to Our Constitutional Rights Act, and I also want to talk. I was trying to think earlier today, and you know how difficult that is for me, on the number of things that the federal government taxes. There's a federal tax on gas. But I don't think that's 1,000%. That there's an idea out there to tax manufacturers, producers of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines 1,000%. That's a presentation out there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that comes close to that?
No,
okay.
I don't. And of course, the real purpose of that, Nate, is to eliminate the sales of it. I think it goes to all semi-automatic weapons, and so not just the so-called assault weapons. And so that's what really triggered the discussion here about needing to do something different, which turned into the Return Act that's not getting publicized. And frankly, it's a very real possibility. It's being proposed by the Ways and Means Committee, the Democrat-led Ways and Means Committee. They control the House, control the Senate, they control the White House, and so far, at least part of Republican leadership is going along with it. So we have to do something if we want to save what it funds, which is wildlife conservation reparations and hunter safety and those types of things. We're going to have to find another revenue stream. And so that's what the Return Act does, and I can explain more if we have time later.
No, we got time. Yeah, we have time. Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us here and calling us in between votes. I love it. I love it when we get worked in between the different votes and goings on there. Return to our Constitutional Rights Act. Upward.
That's basically what it does. It's a response to 1,000% proposal. It would eliminate that tax. First of all, we're saying we don't think that's reasonable that you're penalizing legal, law-abiding gun owners. So no to the 1,000% tax increase on guns, which will kill. Which obviously that's what it's designed to do. It would kill the sales of any kind of semi-automatic weapon, and then the revenue stream for what's called Pittman-Robertson that goes away anyway. And so we have to find another solution one way or the other. So what the Return Act does is it changes the funding mechanism and ties it to the American energy production industry, which is a much larger source in the first place. And frankly, we want to support domestic energy production. And it says no to the 1,000% increase. And so it's not radical. It's a conservative idea that I think fits the demographic of Idaho, and it's not getting reported in its entirety.
How much of a chance does it have?
It is not going to pass during this majority because the Speaker will not hear it. But why it's important is it's an idea that's on the table so that when the agenda changes, and it will change in November in the U.S. House and probably the U.S. Senate, then it's there and it's got traction. Now, that said, hey, there is no magic wand here. If in the meantime we come up with and someone has better ideas, and by all means call. There's no monopoly on wisdom here, but we know we have to do something. The current funding mechanism for our conservation, reparations, and hunter safety and all that kind of thing is basically the Titanic, and there's an iceberg ahead, and so we're trying to put precautions in place and not penalize law-abiding gun owners.
So how much of a chance does the assault weapons tax have?
I think it's got a very significant chance. It's Congressman Bayer from I think he's either Virginia or West Virginia.
Yeah.
And he's on Ways and Means, very senior member, very powerful member. He has got this lined up to where it would get passed with a simple majority in a reconciliation process. And there's at least some of the Republican leadership over on the Senate side that said that they would consider that. And so they've got the numbers in the House. They've got the potentially the support in the Senate, and we know what the White House is going to do. They would love to make that happen. And so obviously we're trying to intervene and stop that and come up with some other alternatives because it's just bad on a number of fronts. In the meantime, you've got this funding mechanism tied to it for things that everybody likes, the conservation of parks and lands and so on. But that revenue, even if this doesn't pass, that revenue stream is at risk. And so we're trying to make some changes.
Is there no restraint on there's a the Bill of Rights prevents cruel and unusual punishment. How about cruel and unusual taxes? Because 1,000%, granted, it's a nice round number for those of people that like nice round numbers. But is there anything in the federal government that comes even close to 1,000%?
Not that I'm aware of. And this is all political, as you might imagine. This is
Sure.
a way for some people to say, I didn't vote to ban gun sales when they basically voted to ban gun sales. So it's an approach. And for some people just to say, hey, look, in my constituency, banning sales is a non-starter, but a tax, yeah, we'll increase the tax on it. Well, there's your 1,000%, and that's where this is trying to go.
Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us live from Washington, D.C. I tell you what, Congressman, we have a traffic and weather break we're going to get to. When we come back, I have to get your take on the news that's come out today that Donald Trump has said it's not a matter of if, but when. Just want to get your take on it.
Timing's good. I'm going to go vote, and I'll be back.
Sounds good.
Broadcasting from the Empire Title Studios, we are News Talk, KBOI.
See, this is one of those times where now I feel bad playing this because Congressman Fulcher is in Washington, D.C., and I know Congressman Fulcher is a huge Goo Goo Dolls fan. And tomorrow, Congressman, just so you know, we're going to be broadcasting from Land Ocean. Our hometown happy hours are back, and I'm going to have a pair of Goo Goo Dolls tickets to give away every hour. And I know this is one of your top 5 bands.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you so much for thinking about me. If someone else comes along in the meantime you may need to exhibit your charitable spirit for, feel free to let that happen.
Here's what I do. There's always date night. Right? Hey, what are we doing tonight? I don't know. You never know. Blah, blah, blah. I have free tickets. I don't care if you know the band or not. I have free tickets. Now you have something to do. Free. Done.
Hey, you know what, though? At least it's not sitting with Nancy Pelosi for a while, so maybe it wouldn't be so bad.
Oh, that's true. That is true. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I have to ask you, President Trump told New York Magazine, said, quote, I would say my big decision will be whether I go before or after, referring to the midterms, is what the publisher is alluding to. Do I go before or after? That'll be my decision. I've already made my decision when he's asked if he's planning to run. So I have to ask your thoughts on this.
Well, I think it's personally, I think he's already made the decision. I think it's going to be a run. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen those signals for some time. He's been so active for other candidates. He's been so active around the country. I mean, it just I've run a few campaigns myself, and you kind of get a feeling for when someone is acting like it. One candidate can tell another candidate is gearing up, and so Nate, I think it is a matter of time, and I think he's going to be in this race. That's also why you see, I think in part, the fervor. With all this January 6th commission to a large extent is because those who oppose him, they want to do everything humanly possible to slow down a potential run.
And I wanted to ask you about this since, I mean, you're in the town. I know you're probably not watching everything going on with those very important committee hearings. Is it moving the needle either way? Are those committee hearings resonating with anybody? Is it changing any metric that has been brought to your attention?
Well, here's a perception, and that's really all I got, because you're right. I have not been sitting through any of those hearings or anything. The members that I serve with, they either support Trump or they don't. And I don't sense any of that changing. But that's also a group of people that's very, very close to it. Very, very, we're involved with all the events that took place on or around January 6th, and so their mind is kind of made up, and probably it's not going to change. Now, where I think that is a very legitimate question is outside of that. These testimonies and these witnesses that are brought forth they're designed for one reason, and that's to build a case against Donald Trump. And some of that, I'm sure there's truth in everything, but the point is there's not a balanced approach. There's no cross-examination. There's no witnesses on the other side, And so with any issue, you got to have both sides. We don't have that. By the way, you will see a Republican response, and it's going to be as one-sided. It's going to be one-sided the other way. And so I'm not a fan of a one-sided commission or hearing either direction. It may be moving the needle outside of this building, but frankly, with the members I serve with, I don't think it's moved anything at all.
While Congressman Fulcher, while you're there in Washington, D.C., there's another meeting going on here in Idaho. The Idaho Republican Party convention is started today in Twin Falls, and there's a number of things on the docket. But as one who your district covers half the state, of course, and there's always been battling. There's always been some differences of opinions, differences of principles here and there. What does will the Republican Party ever be on one track, or will this divide always exist at some level?
It's always going to exist, and I think that there's a good explanation for it, and it's just within the nature of the Republican platform. Republican beliefs is a nature of independence. It's a nature of a strong-willed self-sufficiency. Kind of that ruggedness that comes with an independent, liberty-minded thought process, and guess what? Those people argue all the time. They all have an opinion. And we all have an opinion. I'm a Republican, and we argue all the time. I tell people who say, hey, if there's this divide and it's not healthy, I say, well, look, in the place that I serve, on the other side of the aisle right now, the opposition under the Democrat flag will follow each other over a cliff. And they do. They lock down on a vote, and they do what the speaker says, and that's how it goes. And it's very powerful politically. However, I would argue that it's better to have an argument internally and come up with solutions that are reasonable instead of just blindly follow your leader over a cliff, regardless of the issue. And so I think there's a healthiness to it, Nate. It's not ideal.
Right.
It's frictional. It's not pleasant, but I think there's a healthiness to it.
Confidence level in the Republican side of the House, because the latest, I know nobody believes polls, right? Current House sits at 220 for Democrats, 209 for Republicans. Real Clear Politics has that today at 223 for Republicans, 179 for Democrats, with 33 toss-ups.
Hey, look, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, they are leading the charge on behalf of Republicans because everything they do is making a lot of people mad. And so there is going to be a turnover. It's going to be a very significant turnover. I believe that very, very strongly. And, it's time. I think you see the situation boiling where people have kind of lost confidence in the direction the country is going. The economy is up. Gas prices are off the flaming charts. It's time for a change. I think people realize that it's going to happen.
Congressman Fulcher, all right, get back to work. Appreciate the time, sir.
Thank you, Nate. Take care.
Take care. Cheers.